It all started on New Year's Eve. My boss, Martin, threw a huge party at his house. He's one of those guys who loves to show off his success. A big house, fancy cars, and the best champagne money can buy. My husband, Ben, wasn't into parties like this, and he told me he'd rather stay home. He trusted me completely, and I took that trust for granted. At the party, the drinks were flowing, and I got caught up in the excitement. Martin was charming as always, laughing at my jokes, complimenting my dress, and making me feel noticed. I hadn't felt like that in a long time. Ben was always so reserved, so predictable, and I guess I craved a little spark that night. I made a mistake, a colossal, life-altering mistake. By the time the clock struck midnight, I was tipsy, but it wasn't just the alcohol making me dizzy. Martin and I had been talking closely all evening. I didn't realize how much attention I was giving him until one of my coworkers gave me a knowing look. It was embarrassing, but instead of pulling away, I leaned in further. When the party ended, Martin offered to drive me home. I didn't even hesitate to say yes. I told myself it was harmless, just a ride, right? But deep down, I knew it wasn't innocent. The drive was quiet at first, but then he turned to me and said, "You deserve to be celebrated more often. You know that." His words were like a drug, and I was hooked. When we pulled up to my house, the lights were off. Ben had probably gone to bed early, like he always did. But as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was eerily empty. The living room, where we'd just put up decorations for the holidays, looked barren. The picture frames were gone from the shelves, and the familiar warmth of our home had vanished. "Ben," I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer. I walked into the kitchen, and my heart sank. The drawers were open, and the utensils were missing. The dining table was bare. No placemats, no centerpiece, nothing. It was like a ghost town. Panic set in as I ran upstairs to our bedroom. The closet doors were wide open, and his side was completely empty. His clothes, his shoes, even the watch I bought him for our anniversary, gone. I turned to the bed and saw a single envelope sitting on my pillow. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. Inside was a note that simply read, "I saw enough. Don't bother explaining." It hit me like a freight train. He had been here. He had seen something. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Did he come to the party? Did someone tell him? Or did he somehow know before tonight? I sat on the bed, staring at the note, feeling the walls closing around me. Martin, still downstairs, called up, "Everything okay?" His voice grated on my nerves now. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That's when it really hit me. I had lost everything, and this was just the beginning. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching that note like it was the last shred of my life. My mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. How long had Ben been planning this? How much did he know? What did he see? The ache in my chest was unbearable. This wasn't just a crack in my marriage. This was an earthquake that had left nothing standing. "Hey, you all right up there?" Martin's voice floated up the stairs again, snapping me out of my daze. I shoved the note into my pocket and stormed down the stairs. He was standing in the doorway, holding his coat, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "You should go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Go? Are you sure? You don't look." "I'm sure," I interrupted, harsher than I intended. The last thing I needed was him lingering around, making things worse. He gave me a confused look, but didn't argue. As the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the house became deafening. I began pacing, my thoughts a whirlwind of panic and guilt. The house wasn't just empty, it was stripped of everything that mattered. The pictures from our vacations, the little knickknacks we had collected over the years, even the coffee mug he used every morning, they were all gone. It was like Ben had erased himself from my life in one swift, surgical strike. I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the fridge. The magnet calendar we used to keep track of our schedules was missing. He always joked about how I never updated it, but he still loved seeing it there. That stupid calendar. It was such a small thing, but its absence felt like a dagger in my heart. Then it hit me. The bank account. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and opened the app. My stomach dropped when I saw the balance, practically empty. Ben had taken everything. The savings, the checking, it was all gone. The man I had betrayed had thought of everything, leaving me with nothing but an empty shell of a house. I felt my knees buckle, and I slid down to the floor. Tears spilled out, hot and uncontrollable. This wasn't just guilt anymore, it was despair. How could I have been so blind, so selfish? I had everything, a stable life, a loving husband. and I threw it all away for what? A fleeting moment of attention from someone who didn't even matter. As I sat there, wallowing in the ruins of my life, a new thought crept in. Where had Ben gone? He didn't have family nearby, and he didn't have many friends. He was always a bit of a loner, happy to stay in his comfort zone. If he had planned all this, where would he go? And more importantly, was he ever coming back? I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text. Ben, please, let's talk. I'm sorry, I need to explain. It delivered, but no response. The emptiness in my chest grew, and I realized that I might never hear from him again. He had done more than just leave. He had vanished. Hours passed as I sat in that empty house, replaying everything in my head. I thought about the years we spent building this life together, the sacrifices he made to support me when I went back to school, the nights we spent planning our future. And now it was all gone, shattered by my own reckless choices. Around 3 a.m., I finally forced myself to move. I needed answers, some kind of direction. I grabbed my coat and car keys and headed out. Maybe someone had seen him, or maybe he left a clue somewhere. I drove aimlessly, my eyes scanning the streets for his car, but there was nothing. It felt like chasing a ghost. I ended up at his favorite diner, hoping he might have gone there. The waitress recognized me and gave me a sympathetic smile. "Rough night?" she asked, pouring me a cup of coffee. I didn't have the strength to lie. "Have you seen Ben?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head. "Not tonight. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just couldn't sleep." I left the diner feeling even more lost than before. The realization was sinking in. Ben wasn't just hiding. He didn't want to be found. When I got back home, the first rays of sunlight were creeping over the horizon. I walked into the house and froze. Something was different. On the kitchen counter, there was an envelope. I hadn't seen it before. My heart raced as I approached it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Ben's handwriting. It read, "You'll hear from me when I'm ready. Until then, don't bother looking. I won't be found." And just like that, the walls closed in again. I was alone, truly alone. I spent the next few days trapped in a fog of regret and confusion. Each passing hour without a word from Ben felt like a lifetime. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap, hoping it was him, but it never was. The silence was suffocating, and the emptiness of the house only amplified the guilt gnawing at my soul. I tried to function like a normal person. I went to work, plastering on a fake smile that fooled no one. My coworkers knew something was wrong. Some asked if I was okay, but I brushed them off with vague answers. The truth was too humiliating to share, and I wasn't ready to face the whispers and judgment. Martin, of course, noticed my mood. He cornered me in the break room one afternoon, his voice dripping with concern. "Hey, you've been off lately. Is everything okay at home?" I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that he was the reason my life had fallen apart, but I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded and mumbled something about being tired. He didn't push, but the look in his eyes told me he knew there was more to the story. That night, I returned to the empty house, and for the first time, I truly understood what loneliness felt like. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. The photos that used to line the walls were gone. The couch where we'd binge-watch TV shows on lazy Sundays felt cold and foreign. Even the faint scent of his cologne that used to linger in the air had disappeared. I spent hours replaying that night in my mind, dissecting every detail. Had Ben been watching me at the party? Did someone tell him what happened? Or had he simply pieced it together from my actions over the years? The questions were endless, and the answers felt out of reach. Then, just when I thought I couldn't sink any lower, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You don't deserve him. You never did. He deserves better, and he'll get it now." My heart stopped. Who is this? Was it someone from the party, a friend of Ben's, or God forbid, Ben himself? I stared at the message, my mind racing with possibilities. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. Whoever it was didn't want to talk. They just wanted to twist the knife. The message sent me spiraling. I spent the night pacing the house, unable to sleep. Every shadow felt like it was mocking me, reminding me of how I destroyed my own life. By the time morning came, I was exhausted, but the thought of facing another day at work felt unbearable. Still, I dragged myself out of bed and forced myself to go. The moment I walked through the office doors, I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Had they heard? Did they know? My paranoia was eating me alive. Martin pulled me aside during lunch, his voice low and serious. Listen, I don't know what's going on, but if you need to talk, I'm here. I looked at him, searching for any hint of guilt or acknowledgement. Did he know how much damage he caused, or was he genuinely oblivious? Either way, I couldn't handle his pity. Thanks, but I'm fine, I lied, forcing a weak smile. As the days turned into weeks, the silence from Ben became unbearable. I tried everything, calling his old friends, visiting places he used to go, even reaching out to his estranged brother, Adam. But no one had seen or heard from him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Then one evening, I came home to find another envelope on the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I tore it open. Inside was another note from Ben, written in his familiar handwriting. You're probably wondering where I am, but that's not the question you should be asking. The real question is why I left. Think about it. Reflect. When you're ready to face the truth, maybe I'll consider coming back. Until then, don't waste your time looking for me. The message was vague, cryptic, and infuriating. I wanted answers, real answers, but instead all I got were riddles. I couldn't tell if he was trying to punish me, teach me a lesson, or both. All I knew was that I was drowning in guilt, and the one person who could save me was nowhere to be found. Days blurred into weeks, and my life became a routine of emptiness. Work, home, sleepless nights, repeat. The note Ben had left haunted me. Every word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper with each passing day. I read it over and over, trying to decode what he wanted me to do, how I could possibly face the truth when the truth was already unbearable. The unknown number that had sent the cryptic text didn't contact me again, but the silence was somehow worse. It left me paranoid, jumping at every notification, every shadow in the house. I kept wondering if someone was watching me, judging me from a distance. I didn't know if it was Ben, someone he'd confided in, or my own guilty conscience. One night, as I sat on the couch scrolling aimlessly through old photos on my phone, I stumbled across a picture of Ben and me from a few years ago. We were at the Grand Canyon, smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. I remembered how he had planned that trip as a surprise for our anniversary. He'd spent months saving up, booking the perfect hotel, even arranging a sunrise helicopter ride. I hadn't appreciated it enough back then. I complained about the early wake-up time and the heat. But now, looking at that picture, all I could think about was how much effort he'd put into making me happy, and how little I'd done in return. The guilt was crushing. I knew I'd hurt him in ways I couldn't undo, but was there any way to make it right? Could I ever convince him to come back, or had I burned that bridge forever? Desperate for answers, I decided to reach out to the one person who might know something, Ben's brother, Adam. They weren't particularly close, but Adam was practical and blunt. If Ben had confided in anyone, it would be him. I called, and to my surprise, he picked up on the second ring. Wow, Adam said, his voice laced with sarcasm. Didn't expect to hear from you. I need to talk to you about Ben, I stammered, feeling the weight of his judgment through the phone. There was a long pause. I haven't heard from him, Adam finally said. But if I did, I'm not sure I'd tell you. His words hit me like a slap. Adam, please. I know I screwed up, okay? I just need to know if he's okay. Adam sighed, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he said, look, if he wanted you to know where he is, he'd tell you. Maybe you should think about why he doesn't. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling a fresh wave of despair. Even Adam, who had always been polite if distant, was done with me. It was clear that Ben's disappearance wasn't just about him hiding. It was about cutting ties, erasing me from his life entirely. But why leave the notes? Why give me breadcrumbs if he didn't want me to follow them? That night, as I lay in bed, the house felt colder than ever. I couldn't sleep, so I got up and started rummaging through the few things Ben had left behind. His side of the closet was empty except for one shirt that must have slipped off the hanger. I held it up, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne. It felt like holding on to a ghost. Then I noticed something odd. The shoebox he used to keep under the bed was missing. It wasn't just any shoebox. It was where he kept all our important documents, birth certificates, bank records, the title to the house. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He hadn't just left me. He had prepared for this. I spent the next several hours tearing through the house, looking for anything he might have missed. In the back of a drawer, I found an old USB drive with his initials on it. I plugged it into my laptop, hoping for some clue, but what I found left me speechless. The drive contained folders labeled with dates going back almost a year. Inside were screenshots of text messages, photos, even call logs. He had been tracking me, my phone, my movements, my interactions. One folder was labeled Martin. My stomach churned as I opened it. There, in black and white, was every flirty text, every late-night call, every excuse I had made about working late. He had known for months. The last file in the folder was a video. With trembling hands, I clicked on it. It was from the night of the New Year's Eve party. The footage was grainy, like it had been recorded from a distance, but it was unmistakable. There I was, laughing too hard at Martin's jokes, leaning in too close, touching his arm. And then, the kiss. A quick, fleeting kiss, but enough to confirm everything. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart racing. Ben hadn't just suspected me. He had proof. He had seen it all, and instead of confronting me, he had bided his time, planning his escape. Now, more than ever, I understood the words in his note. Face the truth. The truth was, I had destroyed everything, and now I had to figure out what to do with the ruins. After that night, I felt like a prisoner in my own mind. The video, the notes, the empty house, it was all I could think about. Ben hadn't just left. He'd orchestrated his exit with precision, leaving me to sit in the wreckage of my own decisions. I was angry at him for his coldness, but mostly I was furious at myself. How had I let things get so far out of control? I spent days trying to decide my next move. Should I try to find him? Apologize? Beg for forgiveness? But the truth was, I didn't even know where to start. He'd left no clues, no trails to follow, just those cryptic notes and the USB drive. His way of forcing me to confront the truth about what I'd done. Desperate for answers, I decided to visit Martin. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe closure, maybe someone to share the blame with. But I needed to talk to someone who understood at least part of what I was going through. It wasn't easy convincing myself to face him after everything, but I didn't have much of a choice. He was the only one who knew the whole story, or at least his version of it. When I arrived at Martin's office, his assistant gave me a wary glance. He's in a meeting, she said curtly, clearly unimpressed with my disheveled appearance. I didn't care. I pushed past her and opened the door. Martin was sitting at his desk, mid-conversation with another man in a suit. His expression darkened when he saw me. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice slow and tense. "We need to talk," I said, ignoring the other man's curious glance. Martin sighed, muttering an apology to his colleague before ushering him out of the office. When the door clicked shut, he turned to me, his irritation evident. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is. Ben's gone," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "He left. He emptied the house, the accounts, everything. He knew, Martin. He knew about us." Martin froze for a moment before running a hand through his hair. "I told you this would happen if you weren't careful," he said, his tone more accusatory than sympathetic. "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. "You're blaming me? You were just as involved in this as I was." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "I didn't force you to do anything, Rebecca. You made your choices." His words hit me like a slap. I had come here looking for support, maybe even some kind of shared accountability, but instead he was throwing me under the bus. The man I had risked everything for wasn't just uninterested in helping me. He was actively distancing himself from the fallout. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't even care, do you?" Martin shrugged, his indifference like a dagger to the heart. "Look, I'm sorry your husband left, but that's your problem, not mine. I have my own life to worry about." I stared at him, stunned. The man who had once seemed so charming, so attentive, was nothing more than a selfish opportunist. He didn't care about me. He never had. I turned and walked out without another word, slamming the door behind me. When I got home, the house felt colder than ever. I collapsed on the couch, burying my face in my hands. I had burned my marriage to the ground for a man who couldn't even be bothered to offer me a shred of comfort. The weight of my decisions was crushing. Later that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. My heart leapt, hoping against hope that it was Ben, but when I looked at the screen, it was another message from the same unknown number. "You don't know the full story yet, but you will soon." My breath caught in my throat. What did that mean? Who was behind these messages, and what more could there possibly be to uncover? My hand shook as I typed a reply. "Who is this? What do you want?" The message delivered, but no response came. I spent the rest of the night pacing the house, replaying every interaction, every memory, trying to piece together what this could mean. Was it Ben tormenting me from a distance? Someone else who knew about the affair? Or was this something completely unrelated? The paranoia was consuming me. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit here waiting for answers. If Ben wasn't going to come to me, I had to find him. I had to face him, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much he hated me. Because if I didn't, I would lose myself completely. The next morning, I was determined. I couldn't let the unknown consume me anymore. I had to take action. Ben had left no clear trail, but the cryptic messages suggested that someone, somewhere, knew more than I did. If I couldn't find him directly, I'd start unraveling the pieces of this puzzle one by one. I started by visiting places Ben and I used to frequent. The coffee shop where we had our first date, the park where he loved to jog, even the library he used to visit for some quiet reading time. Each place brought back a flood of memories, bittersweet reminders of the life we'd built together and the countless ways I had taken it for granted. At the coffee shop, I asked the barista if she had seen him. She shook her head. At the park, I scanned the jogging paths, hoping for a familiar figure. Nothing. At the library, I even asked the librarian, but she hadn't seen him either. Everywhere I went, it felt like I was chasing a ghost. By midday, frustration had set in. I was sitting in my car, staring at my phone, debating whether to call Adam again. He hadn't been helpful before, but maybe he'd softened since our last conversation. I dialed his number, and to my surprise, he picked up. "What do you want, Rebecca?" Adam's tone was cold, but at least he was answering. "I need your help," I said, my voice trembling. "I know you said you haven't heard from Ben, but if you know anything at all, please tell me. I'm losing my mind here." There was a long pause on the other end. "Rebecca, you really don't get it, do you?" he finally said. "This isn't about finding him. This is about you owning up to what you've done. Ben doesn't want to be found because he's done with you. He's giving you exactly what you deserve." His words stung, but I couldn't argue with them. "I know I messed up," I whispered, "but I love him, Adam. I need to make this right. Rebecca, if you really love him, maybe the best thing you can do is leave him alone." And with that, he hung up. Feeling defeated, I drove aimlessly for a while, letting my thoughts spiral. Adam's words rang in my ears. "He's done with you." Was he right? Was this all just a futile effort to cling to something that was already gone? As I turned onto the street leading back to the empty house, I noticed something strange. A car I didn't recognize was parked a few houses down. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to have visitors, but something about this car felt off. I parked in my driveway and glanced at it again. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see who was inside, but it felt like they were watching me. Paranoia took over. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me, and peeked out the window. The car was still there, unmoving. Was it a coincidence, or was someone following me? The cryptic text messages flashed in my mind, making me feel even more on edge. I spent the next few hours trying to distract myself, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Finally, as night fell, I worked up the courage to confront whoever was in that car. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help if things went south, and stepped outside. The cool night air sent a shiver down my spine. As I approached the car, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I tapped on the driver's window, my voice shaking. "Can I help you?" The window rolled down slowly, revealing a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and a calm demeanor that somehow made him even more unsettling. "You're Rebecca, right?" he asked, his tone neutral. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping my phone tighter. "I'm just someone doing a job," he said cryptically. "Ben hired me." The ground felt like it shifted beneath me. "Hired you for what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "To keep an eye on things," he replied. "He wanted to make sure you were reflecting." "Reflecting?" I repeated, my anger flaring. "What does that even mean? Where is he?" The man shrugged. "I'm not here to answer your questions. I just report back to him. That's all you need to know." I felt my knees go weak. Ben hadn't just disappeared. He was orchestrating this from the shadows, keeping tabs on me, controlling the narrative. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about teaching me a lesson. Does he hate me that much?" I asked, my voice breaking. The man's expression softened, but only slightly. "I don't think it's about hate. I think it's about making sure you understand what you lost." With that, he rolled up the window and drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway, stunned and hollow inside. In the house, I collapsed onto the couch, trying to process what had just happened. Ben was out there, watching me, but he was staying just out of reach. It was maddening, knowing he was close enough to keep tabs, but unwilling to face me directly. The truth was becoming clearer with every passing day. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a test, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to pass it. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Ben wasn't just gone. He was controlling every piece of this nightmare. The cryptic notes, the hired observer, the empty house, it all made sense now. He wanted me to feel the emptiness, to sit in the ruins of what I had destroyed, and it was working. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't going to just sit around and let Ben pull the strings. If he wanted me to reflect, I'd do it, but on my terms. I grabbed a notebook from the shelf and started writing. Every mistake I'd made, every sign I'd ignored, every way I had hurt him, it all poured out onto the pages. I didn't know if it would help, but it was a start. By the time the sun set, I had filled pages with my thoughts and regrets, feeling both exhausted and strangely lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control of my own story. The next day, I decided to take things further. I started reaching out to people who knew us as a couple, friends, coworkers, even Ben's old college roommate. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I just wanted to understand how others saw us, what they had noticed that I might have missed. One conversation stuck with me. I called a mutual friend, Emily, who had known us since we first started dating. She was hesitant at first, but eventually opened up. "Rebecca, I'm not going to sugarcoat this," she said. "Ben adored you, but he hid a lot. He didn't want to show how much some of your actions hurt him." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. She sighed. "You know how he always joked about you working late, or forgetting date nights? He wasn't really laughing, Rebecca. He just didn't want to make you feel bad. He kept a lot of that bottled up, but it ate at him." Her words hit me hard. I had always brushed off his quiet disappointments, thinking he didn't care as much as I did. But now it was clear that he cared more, so much more, and I had taken it all for granted. "Do you know where he is?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No," she said softly. "But if he's staying away, it's because he needs to heal. And maybe you need to let him." That evening, I sat on the floor of our empty living room, staring at the blank walls. I couldn't deny it anymore. This was my fault. All of it. And if Ben needed space to heal, I had to respect that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something I was still missing. As I was cleaning up the scattered pages of my notebook, my phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "You're starting to get it, but there's one last thing you need to know." I froze, my heart racing. I typed back quickly. "What is it? Please, just tell me." A minute passed, then two. Finally, another message appeared. "Check your emails. Look for a message from him." My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and logged into my email. My inbox was a mess of spam and work updates, but I searched for Ben's name. Sure enough, there it was, an email from weeks ago, one I had completely missed in my frantic haze. The subject line read, "The last thing I'll say." I clicked on it, my breath catching in my throat. "Rebecca, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I don't know if you'll ever truly understand why I left, but I hope you try. You've hurt me in ways I never thought possible, but this isn't about revenge. This is about showing you what it feels like to lose something you love. You need to know that I didn't just walk away because of Martin or the affair. This has been building for years. The missed moments, the careless words, the way you always put yourself first. It all added up. I stayed because I loved you, even when it hurt. But love isn't enough when only one person is holding on. I hope this time apart gives you the clarity you need. And maybe one day, we can have a real conversation. Until then, I wish you nothing but the best. Ben." I read the email over and over, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't just about New Year's Eve. This was about years of neglect, of selfishness, of taking him for granted. I had been so focused on my own needs that I had ignored the pain I was causing him. But the part that hit me the hardest was the last line. "Maybe one day we can have a real conversation." It wasn't a promise, but it was a sliver of hope. He hadn't closed the door completely. There was still a chance, however small, that I could make things right. I closed the laptop and stared into the darkness, my mind racing. If I wanted that conversation, I had to change, not for him, but for myself. Because the woman I had been wasn't someone worth holding on to. The email replayed in my mind on an endless loop. Ben had left not just because of the affair, but because of the years of small, seemingly insignificant moments that had piled up and crushed his spirit. And I had been too blind to see it. I wasn't just guilty of one night of betrayal. I was guilty of slowly unraveling the love we'd built over years. The weight of that realization felt unbearable, but as heavy as it was, I couldn't let it paralyze me. Ben's words had given me a shred of hope, a chance, however slim, to prove I could be better. If he ever came back, if he ever wanted that real conversation, I needed to be ready. The next few weeks became a period of transformation. I deleted Martin's number and cut off any lingering ties to the man who had been nothing but a catalyst for my mistakes. I couldn't change the past, but I could control who I allowed in my life moving forward. I threw myself into therapy, something I'd resisted for years. Sitting across from a stranger, bearing my soul, was terrifying, but it was also cathartic. I began to unpack not just my marriage, but the deep-rooted insecurities and patterns that had led me to sabotage the best thing I ever had. My therapist, a calm and patient woman named Dr. Harris, didn't let me off the hook. She made me confront the ugliest parts of myself, the parts I'd ignored for far too long. "Rebecca," she said during one session, "you've spent a lot of time focusing on what you've lost. But have you thought about what you still have? What you can still build, even if Ben never comes back?" Her question struck a nerve. I had been so consumed by my guilt and regret that I hadn't even considered the possibility of moving forward without him. The idea was painful, but it was also freeing. If I couldn't undo the past, I could at least create a future I could be proud of. One evening, as I was sorting through some old boxes, I found a journal Ben had given me years ago. I had barely written in it, dismissing it as a cheesy gift at the time. But now, it felt like a lifeline. I opened it and began writing, pouring out my thoughts, my regrets, my hopes for the future. It became a nightly ritual, a way to process everything I was feeling. I also started volunteering at a local shelter, something Ben had always talked about doing, but we never got around to. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, and it reminded me of the kind, selfless man I had fallen in love with. In a way, it felt like honoring him, even from a distance. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. I came home to find another envelope on the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I tore it open, but this time there was no cryptic note. Instead, there was a single piece of paper with an address written on it. No sign, no explanation, just an address. I stared at it, my mind racing. Was this from Ben? Had he finally decided to reach out? Or was this another test, another way to see if I was truly ready to face him? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I packed a bag, not knowing what to expect, and set out for the address. It led me to a small cabin in the woods, about 2 hours outside of town. My hands were trembling as I parked the car and approached the door. I knocked, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the door opened. There he was, Ben. He looked different, thinner, older, as if the weight of the past months had aged him. But his eyes were the same, filled with that quiet intensity one had fallen in love with. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at me, like he was trying to decide if I was real. "Hi," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The cabin was simple, cozy, and unmistakably his. Books lined the shelves, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. It felt like him in every way. We sat down at the small kitchen table, the silence heavy between us. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I couldn't waste this moment. "Ben, I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "For everything. For taking you for granted, for hurting you, for not seeing what I had until it was gone. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I've changed. I've been working on myself, trying to be better, not just for you, but for me. Because I don't want to be that person anymore." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked out the window, his jaw tight. "Do you know why I left?" he finally asked, his voice calm but firm. I nodded. "Because I broke us. Because I hurt you in ways I can't undo." He turned back to me, his eyes searching mine. "It wasn't just about the affair, Rebecca. It was about everything. The little ways you stopped caring, The way you made me feel invisible. I loved you so much, but I couldn't keep loving someone who didn't see me. His words cut deep, but I knew he was right. I see you now, Ben. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me. For the first time, his expression softened. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, he said. But I believe you're trying. And that means something. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but it was a start. And for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope.